a lot of people registered, weren't even expecting that much. And we're excited to chat with you tonight because this whole conversation about traditional book publishing is sometimes very mysterious. Sometimes there's a lot of confusion. And this group of women that you see here, we actually are all in a Voxer group together, and we are all at different stages in the journey or have worked on the inside and outside of the traditional book publishing realm, or we want to publish. We're just all over the map. And we thought it would be really interesting to have this conversation, answer some questions, talk honestly about it, because it really can be sort of an emotional roller coaster when you're in any part of it, to be honest with you. Even if you are just starting to think about it, there's so much to know. And then coming out on the other side, there's so much that you look back and say, man, I wish I would have known that. And so we're going to be speaking to all parts of that today. So let me go ahead and introduce myself, and then we're going to introduce everyone else. My name is Erica Anderson. I'm a freelance writer, live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I have published 2 books traditionally. So I'll be talking sort of like on that side of things, having gone through it and all the good, bad, and the ugly of that whole process. My second book came out in January of this year. And I am a writing coach and do all the things. We'll talk more about some of those other things. But for now, I'm going to pass it around. I'll just call you guys out since there's so many of you to introduce yourselves. And then I'll have you go last, Ariel, since you're going to sort of give us a little bit of a insight on where this conversation came from, what inspired it. So I will start with you, Meredith, if you want to jump to introduction of yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Meredith, and I am coming into publishing from left field. I am a classically trained musician. I play the oboe, and had always wanted to write. My mother was an elementary school librarian at my school, and so I really came to this during the pandemic is when I started my podcast, which is called Artists for Joy. And so I'm right in the middle of the first traditional book that I've written is called The Artist's Joy, a guide to getting unstuck, embracing imperfection, and loving your creative life. And so I just turned in my manuscript on April 10th. And so I'm here to talk about what it's like right in the middle of everything. So excited to be here. Mara, you want to go next?
I can't hear you, Mara. Are you on mute?
Sorry, had a technical difficulty. Hi, I'm Mara Eller. I have been on Zoom before. And it's just so fun to be here with all of these wonderful ladies. I'm a freelance editor and writer. I'm sort of testing the waters and exploring options for a couple of book projects that I have in the works. And so I'm thinking about everything from that side and asking a lot of questions that maybe some of you have been wondering. And then also have some insight from the editing side of things, of just, getting manuscripts that have been through some part of the publishing process and working with authors who have had various experiences.
All right.
How about, you want to hand it off?
I was going to say, go Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz. I am a ghostwriter and book proposal writer. I have ghostwritten dozens of books, most of which are traditionally published, a number of which traditionally published with the Big Five. I am working on my first book under my own name with Ariel. Ariel and I together run Hungry Authors, which is a writing community that includes a podcast, the forthcoming book, and all kinds of good stuff. So that's me.
Right. All right, Molly.
Hello, I'm Molly, and I am also a freelance writer. Who would have guessed? I'm an author. I wrote my first book and published it through a hybrid publisher in August, which was super exciting. And then I've also contributed to some other traditionally published books and love just talking all things publishing, because I'm also a writing coach and love coaching other creative entrepreneurs and having these conversations. So super excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, Ariel, we're going to jump to you. And I know that you're going to mention our guest that may be joining us later, Kristen. So we'll let you talk
Yeah.
about her and talk about yourself and the inspiration for this podcast
Okay.
or this video. That's a lot.
I'll try to remember everything. Okay, so first of all, I'll introduce Kristen Vanderlip, who's not able to join us right at this moment because her husband is coming out of surgery, but she might be able to pop in a little bit later. So we are hoping that that will be the case. But Kristen Vanderlip is a writing coach. She's a former English teacher. And she has a beautiful Instagram. You should all go follow her on Instagram. It's at Kristen Vanderlip. She speaks beautifully about trauma and writing and using writing to heal through grief. And she has self-published a journal called The Rest, a journal for lament, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So if she can make it, she's going to be kind of representing that side of things in this discussion. And so me, I am Ariel Curry. If you don't know me, I'm a former acquisitions editor. I worked for an independent publishing company for many years before joining the freelance life and meeting all of these ladies and joining us kind of in this group. So now I am a book proposal writer, editor turned ghostwriter, and I run Hungry Authors with Liz. So, okay, so why are we here today and what kind of inspired this conversation? So many of you may be familiar with a podcaster and a blogger and a style guru named Hillary Rushford. She runs a fantastic account. She's very well known, has a big profile, and she did everything kind of right in the industry. Like she followed kind of the author platform growing trajectory to a T. She has a great platform. She hired a book coach, got help with a proposal. She found literary agents, and she ended up signing with a really big publisher. As far as we know, they evidently really pursued her and kind of set up this wonderful relationship that it was supposed to be. And they offered her a multi-six-figure deal. So it was a very, very big deal, kind of supposed to be all of the things that you would want in this life, right? All the things that we think we should want as writers. And, you know, this traditional publishing deal is often kind of put on this pedestal. And so she got all of the things that we typically think that we want as writers. Unfortunately, things did not go well. After all of that wonderful, you know, expectations were set, things started to fall apart. We don't know all of the details. There are some things that legally she cannot share. So you can listen to her podcast. She has 3 episodes about what happened. That kind of goes into a lot of detail from her perspective, everything that she can legally share. But we do know that at best, this was a case of miscommunicated or uncommunicated expectations around how traditional publishing was going to work and how it was going to go for her. At worst, it was a case of like extreme negligence and even malice, I think, in the situation. It was pretty extreme. Even someone who worked in traditional publishing for many, many years, I was shocked at some of the things that we learned from her experience. Nothing was completely outside of the realm of normal. None of the catalysts for conflict, I'll say, none of the like original sins in the situation were things that are like totally wrong or not to be expected. But from someone who is not in that world, for an author who is a first-time author, had 0 experience with publishing before, there is absolutely no way that she could have known what was normal in the industry and what publishers were going to be coming to her with kind of the mindset of. So it has raised this question amongst all of us of like, what is normal in the publishing industry? What should authors really expect? And how do we kind of debunk some of these myths and misconceptions? Because I think a lot of us walk into what we hope is a traditional publishing deal with so many assumptions and expectations for how this is going to work, and you know, maybe misreadings of what the publishing industry is really here to offer us and what they really offer as their value. So that's what brings us to this table tonight, is we want to share with all of you some myths and misconceptions, so that if you walk into a traditional publishing relationship in any capacity for any reason whatsoever, you will have an understanding of what your partner in this relationship thinks is normal, and you will have an understanding of their mindsets and their expectations for you as the author. So we're here to hopefully shed lots of light where you may not have heard things before, and to hopefully prepare you for what can be a very beautiful relationship if you can go into it knowing what to expect.
Yeah, and we will, if there's time at the end, we'll take Q&A. So if you want to just hold your questions, and then we'll tell you when you can put them in the chat, and then we'll answer as many as we can. With a lot of people, it's, we are probably going to run into time, but yeah, thank you so much, Ariel. I think, so how we've sort of structured this is to go through a myth at a time. So I'm going to say the myth, and then we're going to talk about the reality. And for all the ladies on the panel, I'm just going to sort of like open it up. I'm going to moderate the questions. You guys can jump in. And the other thing is, if you have a question, those of you who are on the panel, if you are like, I don't understand this, or you have a question, or you want to clarify something for the audience, like go ahead and throw that in there too. It's sort of, we want this to be a conversation. And so for those of you watching, like, if you do have a question, like right in the middle of something confusing, like feel free to just pop it in. And if I see it, I'll try to answer it. So all that being said, what you just said, Ariel, actually reminded me of, as freelancers, which, I think we all consider ourselves in some capacity, we sometimes have to be responsible for educating our clients about what we do and what they can expect from us. And I feel like the book publishing industry needs to do that, but doesn't. That's been my experience. Like, I needed someone to say, okay, here is what you might be expecting, but here's how it really is. And I think that's really could solve a lot of their problems. I'm not really sure why someone's not necessarily doing that yet. So let me go to myth number 1. And if anyone can hear crying, that is just mom life. I have a crying child outside of my door. So let's just get on with it. Okay, myth number 1. Okay, book publishers are here for you. That's the myth. The reality, they are here for themselves to make money. And that is sort of like maybe the main misconception that I heard with Hillary, or one of the main misconceptions. Like, she kind of thought that the book publisher was her friend, that they were in this just as much as her. They cared about her message just as much as her. They cared, but the reality was they have a business to run, and their books are products. And so I'll throw that out there, whoever wants to go for it. Anyone? Thoughts?
Well,
or
I'll break the ice. I know I just was talking for a long time, sorry, but this is a particularly apt question, I think, that I can answer, and that is because publishers are investors. So if you think of your idea as a business, in a sense, publishers are here to invest in good ideas, and hopefully the thought is that when they make an investment in that idea and give it life as a book, that investment is going to create a return that's bigger than the investment they've made, right? That's how they stay in business. That's how they pay their bills. That's how they pay their editors and everyone who works for them. That's how they pay advances on their authors, is they need books to make more money than the publisher spent on them so that they can continue this process. So book publishers are first and foremost, and acquisitions editors are first and foremost investors. They're trying to make a good deal, and acquisitions editors have a very real reality that if you're a bad investor, your career in publishing will not be so long.
Yeah, and I don't know, for those of you that have been on that side of things where you've been told you need a bigger platform, that kind of a thing, can you speak to sort of how that sort of affects your thinking going into it? Like, does it feel like an impossible goal? And does it make you feel sort of like, I'm just, a product, I'm just a cog in a wheel, and it'll, kind of you're holding out hope, but you're not sure if you can do it? Anyone that's been in that position?
Well, I write about finding joy in the creative life, and I was so highly aware then of when the publishing process was not joyful, when it felt like I was so focused on marketability that creativity had not been at the center of it anymore. And so that I really struggled with that. I think after I found an agent, that was when the real work began, because all the agents that I had talked to were like, we want to wait to pitch your book until you get, more followers on Instagram and we get the email number up. And there was not like an arbitrary number we were trying to reach. We were just like, let's wait until after the summer anyway, because it's not a great time to pitch a book per his advice. And yeah, I just felt like I was just trying to sell myself so much that I had forgotten to look within and sort of protect that desire to share my message and what I believed was the message of the book. And then the publisher's not there for you. I have been shocked at how the email world works in publishing. Like, email etiquette it's like a whole new world. And so I really had to readjust my expectations with that. So if you don't hear back from somebody in a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, like that's totally normal. But you have to work on your own joy and your own practice so that you're not sitting there waiting, because you never know, they could never write back. Right. And so yeah, it's a constant battle between managing that wanting to sell the product of the book and still be the craft of writing and still be a joyful, creative person.
Yeah. Anyone else like feel that struggle? Because I know that, for those of us that have wanted to publish books, it's like you have this idea and it's so part of your heart. Like it's a passion project. It's something you care about so much. And then it's almost like you have to fit it into this box of book publishing, like exactly what they want. You have to write a book proposal and you have to tell them this, that, and the other thing. And it may sort of feel like you have to squeeze the creative out of it. I don't know if anyone has felt that before. And if you did, how are you, or have you overcome that sort of resistance? I don't know if you have that, Molly. Molly, I'm looking at you.
I feel like everyone's like thinking this in this group. So I love sales, which is kind of different for a creative. I think a lot of creatives are like, oh my gosh, sales, marketing, gross, get away. But I love selling stuff. And so when I have these conversations, especially with clients who I'm coaching, and they're like really resistant to the idea of marketing their work, I kind of go back to like, just like, in general, if we're creating art or we're creating any beautiful thing that we want to share with the world, it has to be a conversation, like you want someone to receive it, right? And so if you want someone to respond to it and to receive your work, then you have to be willing to put yourself out there and sell your work and market your work. And so I take the approach that I really believe selling books or whatever product it is serving the person who needs it. And so I try to take the approach of selling as serving. And so how can I best serve the reader who needs that book or the person who needs to pick that thing up? And that's kind of the mindset shift that I adopt to really enjoy that process and kind of find joy in saying, okay, like, how can I come up with these like fun ways to get people involved, to get them excited about my work, and to also engage in that conversation of like, I'm creating something, someone else has to consume it for it to like be a conversation, and for me to be kind of part of the creative walk. Like, it's not as fun to create in isolation. And so I think when you take that standpoint on it, then it can become more fun. But I think a lot of artists and a lot of creatives are like just a little bit resistant to the idea of like a publisher asking us to do that. And so I think we have to kind of step aside and be like, how can I do this in a way that's authentic to me? And so maybe for some people that's not the email list. Maybe that's like the podcast. Like Meredith has an amazing podcast, Ariel and Liz, amazing podcasters, So it's like maybe you just find something that feels fun, which I talk about a lot too. Find something that feels fun and then just press into that. That would be my advice.
Okay, guys, I'm just hearing, for those that are watching, that somehow the chat is disabled. I am not sure if I'm going to be able to fix that while we are on. So I apologize. If you have a question, you can feel free to reply to the email you got with the Zoom link, and I'll check there if you have a question you want us to answer. I'm sorry, I guess I set it up and did not. I don't know. You'd think they would just let you have the chat on, but they don't. So I apologize. I can't fix it right now. Okay. On that note, I was going to say, Yes, Molly. So, it's like, of course we can all write whatever we want for whatever reason we want it, right? But it's like, if we want someone to read it, we have to write it in a way that makes them want to read it. And so I think when publishers are giving us some of this direction, when they're making edits and saying like, we need to focus more on this, or, focus more on the other thing, like they're thinking of the reader, because if the reader doesn't like it, then you're not going to sell books. And I don't know, Liz or Ariel, if one of you could speak to, having, been on the editor side of things. And actually, Mara, you too, you have been on the editing side of a book. So anyone that wants to jump in terms of when you're editing a book, what are you thinking about? Like why do you make some of the decisions that you do in thinking of the reader?
Well, I can say just a couple of things. I think all editors would agree that our goal is, or at least all good editors in my humble opinion, but that our goal is to help the author articulate their ideas and their vision as clearly and effectively as possible. And part of that effectiveness means having an understanding of your reader and your audience and trying to put yourself in their shoes. And so therefore, sometimes you have to say things in a slightly different way than, you might if you were just having the conversation in your head. But I feel like one of the places where, in Hillary's story, at least the way she experienced it, that things sort of went south was like she had this vision that she articulated, and she felt like her editors were not, weren't even grasping the vision and weren't on board with her. And so I think in my experience, there can be a fine line between, being on board with the author and partnering with them to bring this thing to life, but also when, your job is to give constructive criticism and, shape that vision so that it can be most effective, but not to sort of hijack that vision or just dismiss an important part of it. So I don't know if Ariel or Liz, you might have experienced sort of working into that messy area where maybe an author has a vision that is like really not, in some way like misaligned with the audience, and like how you would navigate that. But it seems to me that it's really important for the author to feel like you're a partner with them.
I'm not an editor. Go, Ariel.
Okay. So those of you who have worked with me before know that I talk like ad nauseum about, I say the word transformation all the frickin' time, and you're all probably sick of it. But that's because I so strongly believe that our goal as authors is to deliver a transformation for the reader, even if that transformation is in the form of my transformation as a memoir writer, or someone else's transformation as a biography writer or a narrative nonfiction writer. So I harp again and again and again on this idea of transformation. So when, as an acquisitions editor, I saw that a lot, where a lot of the time authors were saying, I really, really want to write about this because I'm so passionate about this. But when you look at, does that parallel, or how does that align with the reader's experience of that problem? Or how does that align with, what the reader is going to expect as far as a transformation? That they're picking up this book to solve a problem for themselves. You have to deliver that transformation. Otherwise, a reader is going to feel like they didn't get what they wanted out of it. So I am always trying to honor the author's vision while also making sure that the reader ultimately gets what they need from the book.
Yeah. And
Can I add something to that?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So I was being edited this week, and one of the things that my editor said was, let's make the table of contents less literary and more transformational. Like, let them see, even though these chapter titles you came up with are so witty and fun and they coordinate so well, I was like, no, like, we need fewer words. We need like boom, 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 boom. They need to see that because they are thinking, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating sometimes because I want to design this like beautiful thing. And she's like, well, we can do that, but no one's going to read it if we can't grab them. And like, who doesn't go to library or bookstores or libraries and like open the book and look at the table of contents? Like I do that. So that worked.
Yeah. And also that's one reason when people tell me like, oh yeah, my book title is, I'm like, don't hold on to that. Cause that's
Totally.
probably not going to be the title at the end. I mean, both of my books, I had alternate titles that ultimately were not the title at all. And a part that was in part trusting the publishers, like they understand the market in a way that you don't because they've been doing it. And so it's kind of like you do have to step back and let them do their job, which is not your job. And then also, I think just being communicative, I will say in terms of my experience the second time around, when I, got assigned my editor, I made sure to have like a face-to-face Zoom call with her because I felt like my first book, it was all email. I don't think I ever Zoomed with the editor that I worked with. We emailed, but like I never actually spoke to her. And I was like, I want this editor to see me. I want her to hear the passion that I have for my message. I want her to know this is important to me. And I told her that. I told her about my first experience. And I was like, I just want to know that the person that's editing this book actually cares about this message too. I mean, I was just vulnerable about it. And it made me feel so much better being able to say that to her. And in that vulnerability, she was able to say to me, actually, it's so interesting because this book, actually, I'm kind of the target audience. Like I am, like my book was about returning to church, and like she's like, I actually just started going back to church for the first time in many years. So I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like that's kind of, hey, maybe that was a God thing, but I think that communication, like don't wait to ask questions. Don't wait to like, well, supposedly they're getting back to me. Like, do try to be communicative as possible. So let me move on to the next myth so we don't get stuck on one thing forever. Okay, myth is book deals are a good way to make some money. Reality, advances are really small unless you're a celebrity, and really should and could be used for your own marketing. And plus, it doesn't all come in at one time. It usually comes in probably 3 payments. That's how it's worked for me. Sort of like at signing, what is it?
At first draft, and then
at completion of manuscript or
Yeah.
book when book meets the street.
Right. Okay. So then you get paid in 3s, but then also almost always you have a book agent. And that book agent usually takes about 15% of whatever the advance is. And you really, I don't know that we'll have time to get into the nitty gritty of this, but you really need a book agent because they understand the legal ins and outs and all the things that you're never going to know unless you hire a lawyer. So just get an agent so they can be your lawyer for you, basically. I don't know, feel free to disagree with me or hop in and add your own thoughts if someone has other thoughts than that. But so that's where some of your money goes. So let's talk about what can people expect for an agent for a first book? Should we talk numbers? Anybody? I mean, you don't have to say what yours was, but if you want to, can we give an idea of what a first-time author might expect?
Well, I'll tell you what my agent told me. He said, if you get an advance that is in the mid to low teens, like $13,000-$15,000, then that I would see that as a success.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a great, and we got offers that were right with that and that were way lower, and like literally like way lower, like 1% of that, so yeah, it's just such a huge, and maybe Errol can explain the sweet deal, nice deal, special deal, what all the deal words are in the those aren't the words, but in the publisher's marketplace piece, because you can actually go and do a little bit of sneaking around on the internet to find out what people were offered. And I Erica, you've spoken publicly about what your advances were, right?
Yes, but I don't think I'm a good example. I had a very high advance my first book, completely atypical, like not even remotely realistic. And so I don't want to put that into anyone's framework. Like I'll tell you, like why I think my advance was so high. And I think it was because I had a book that was very on trend with like one of the #1 books of sort of just the previous year. And I was in a space where I had a great network of people that had access to lots of media. And so my book proposal was sort of chock full of all of these sort of influential individuals that I had connections with that were saying they were willing to help promote the book in the right places. And then it came down to a couple of different publishers that were interested. And so the one that actually really wanted my book, they actually upped the advance because they were like, we see this slipping away and we want to get this one. And so my experience was very abnormal. My second experience, much more normal. So my second advance was $15,000. And, you know, like Meredith is saying, it's like that $15,000 broken up by the hours you spend on your book. You're not doing this for the money, right? Like you're doing that, like you have, in my opinion, you have to have a deeper passion. Otherwise I'd have to be paid more. I couldn't do it any other way. And so, I mean, I think you can get more than that. I think it depends. It does depend on platform. It does depend on who you know. If you're somebody that's on TV and you have the ability to broadcast your book to millions of people, you're probably going to get a bigger book deal. Now, like, so that's the myth, right? So you're not going to make money on this, but that doesn't mean that you can't make money down the road through selling it, and that kind of thing. So anyone else want to jump in on this money chat before I ramble on?
I'll add a couple things. So I put a link in the chat to a graphic. It's a chart from Publishers Marketplace, which is kind of this data warehouse for, publishing as an industry. So that is the first quarter from 2023. So this is very recent data. And you can see that deals in 2023 particularly are down quite a bit. So people like publishers, and we could do a whole other webinar on why that is, but there's just a lot of things going on in publishing and people are very conservative right now and not a lot of deals are getting signed, period. And the deals that are getting signed, editors are being very, very conservative. So they're not offering a lot of big advances. The other thing is that when you get an advance, it's not just like, here's all this money just because we like you. It's here's how much money we feel very confident that we will make back from your book. And there are not explicit, but there are kind of implicit expectations for that money. Like you're kind of expected, and this is something that I think caught Hillary by surprise, that money is to be used for things like developmental editing or ghostwriting if you need it. It is also to be used for marketing and publicity if you need it. So if you can do those things on your own without spending that money, great. But also that advance money is given to you to help make the book more successful. They are giving you that money with the assumption that you will use it wisely to further the book's success. So it's not meant to replace like your salary. It's not meant to buy you a new couch, although that would be nice. Like it's none of those things. It's supposed to help you make the book more successful.
Yeah, that was one of the things that she had a huge misconception about. Like one of the things I kept harping on in this podcast, I kept coming back on Voxer and saying what annoyed me about the podcast. And one of the things was she kept saying, I quit my job to do that. This is my full-time job. This is my full-time job. And I can guarantee you probably that the book publishers didn't intend for her to do that probably. Because it's like, she even at one point said, I'm working for them. Nope, that's not true. You're not working for them. It's sort of like has to be viewed like, I guess a side hustle is a no better way to say it. But like, this is not something that you can just quit your job and like, hey, I got a book deal, I'm making money, whatever. No, it takes so much more than that. And like, for example, okay, so somebody was asking a question about the money. Yeah. So 15K broken up into 3 different payments is what was for me and you, Meredith, too. But losing my train of thought. Hold on.
They were asking about royalties too.
Royalties. Okay. Yes. Let me get to that. So even for me, so I got this traditional book deal, but I was like, I wanted to, I knew that turning in your manuscript, like I had heard prior to ever publishing, I had heard like, oh, editors like make your book so much better. And I'm not saying they don't. I know we have editors on here. That's not what I'm saying. But to me, my first book experience, like I didn't feel like they really changed all that much. And so I thought, this really is up to me. Like, this is my writing. This isn't the editor's writing. And so before I turned in my manuscript, I actually hired someone to give me a structural edit before even turning it into my publisher, because I was like, this is my book. Like, this is got to be good when I turn it in so that they make it even better with edits. So there's that. And then, yeah, the marketing side, like, yes, the publisher, we're going to get to this, but yes, the publisher does provide marketing for you. They do provide some of that, but many of you on this call have probably heard before, like it's seriously up to you in so many ways. And so we'll get to that in another myth, but we'll throw it out there right now. And on the royalty question, Ariel sort of answered that, but yeah, royalties come in later. Like if you fulfill the sales of what they expected and what, sort of you basically sell out your advance, then you begin making money on the royalties, a percentage, which is a smaller percentage. So that is why sometimes people choose like, hey, I don't even want to do this traditional book publishing thing. I just want to go self-publish, because then I have basically control over the financial side and control over everything else for that matter. And I know that we have people on here that are really interested in the conversation of self versus traditional. And so we may get into that a little bit, but that is that. So let me go on to the next myth. And maybe we'll do two at a time. So myth is, once the schedule is set, it'll never change. In reality, delays are common. And another myth, communication will be prompt and frequent when you work with a publisher. Reality, they are working with tons of authors and you are not their priority in life, which is another problem that I think our friend Hillary was understanding. So who has thoughts on those myths? Anyone want to jump in?
Liz, I would love to have you answer this one, because I know you've as a ghostwriter, you've probably worked with a lot of the big publishers with big clients. So how does it look from your vantage point?
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of sympathy for publishers, editors especially, and feel very defensive of them because I work with a lot of them and they are good friends of mine. And I relate in a job like way to acquiring editors, because I, as a ghostwriter, have multiple clients as well, author clients, who to them, their book is the most important thing in their life, in their work. It's writing a book is a big deal. It's a legacy. It's, I have clients who have huge multi-million-dollar businesses and still their book is the most important thing to them. And it's a lot of pressure to be working with multiple people who their book, the project is the most important thing to them. And quite frankly, to me, it's a job, and that's how editors feel. It's not an excuse for not returning emails in a timely manner, but it is hard. And nobody will ever care as much as you. They just won't. Like, your book is amazing, and most people in publishing are just normal people who also love books and want to help you and want to make it the best they can be. And they also want to go home at 5 and not think about you, And so like, and also, editors, I know Ariel can relate to this, like editors get into editing because they like editing. I mean, that might sound like duh, and they spend an inordinate amount of their time not editing because they have authors whose life work they feel like is on the line, and they're emailing about all kinds of stuff, covers and stuff that are important, but they're not what the editor wants to do. And, it's just like that extra kind of administrative part of their job. And so I think actually, and most people in publishing would agree that like editors are just overworked right now, like, because it goes along with the advances and stuff, because advances are down, like hiring is down, and so they're overloading editors. Most editors have too many projects on their plate and that sort of thing. But I think communication will be prompt and frequent. No, probably not. Like, don't be surprised if deadlines whiz by, nobody says anything to you. It's normal. Unfortunately, I'm not saying it should be this way. It is kind of normal. Unfortunately, schedule is set, it'll never change. No, it'll change a lot. I don't know if I've ever had a book come out exactly when it was originally estimated to come out in the contract. And they build in all kinds of wiggle room, so it's usually not that big of a deal. And yeah, I mean, the main thing is that, like, at the end of the day, no one cares as much as you, and you are ultimately responsible for everything. Like, I think, that's just the reality of it. Like, you will probably have a great team, but no one will care as much as you, and you are still ultimately responsible for the quality of it, the marketing of it, and everything. And I don't know if that's fair or not, but it's just the reality of it. And if deadlines go whizzing by, like, go knock on people's door, irritate them, keep emailing, like, it's I don't know why it is that way. Meredith and I had like a Vox back and forth about that. Like, I don't know why it seems like it's the same publishing house to publishing house. Like, it's just not that common for like deadlines to go by. And I have authors emailing me like, hey, I haven't heard anything for a month. What's going on? And I'm like, I don't know, but I guarantee you that poor editor is drowning. That's what I know. And I know that probably doesn't feel good to you, because you're like, am I getting a good edit? You worry about the quality, but I don't know. That's just the way it is.
Well,
Is that a
and
bummer?
they'll pass the deadline, and then they'll be like, and then can you have this back to us next week? And you're like, but what? Wait a second. It's Christmas break. This is what happened to me. They're like, can you get this
Yeah.
back to us on January 2nd? And I was like, that's like really bad timing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And also we talked about this, guys, that editors often, they're given too much work. Like, they are the liaison for everything, and it's not their fault. And so you have to have grace for them being in like a really tough position, right?
So one thing we talked about on the Voxer was how, some of these things may be totally normal, but that doesn't mean they're ideal or, the way they should be. And so it's sort of a complicated, complex conversation that way, because one of the things that I thought Hillary was struggling with was this sort of double standard that you just alluded to, where you're supposed to expect them to get back to you anytime and to change the schedule whenever they feel like it, but you're supposed to turn things around like that and keep all of your deadlines. And you're ultimately responsible, as you were saying, Liz, for the manuscript and for the work and, for all of it, but also you're like not in charge of it, is what it sounds like. And so as somebody who hasn't been in it, that sounds really unpleasant and unfair and frustrating. And it sort of brings me back to a question that I've been wondering a lot, is like, how do we think about the relationship between a publisher and an author in traditional publishing? Because like you said, you're not an employee of the publisher, but you're also not the boss, even though it's your book and you're responsible for it. So it's like, it seems like it's just really confusing. How do we define that relationship in a way that's like not inaccurate, but maybe helpful?
I sent my contract to an attorney who is a friend, and he does contract law, and he sent it back and he said, this is all pretty standard, but I just want you to know that you're about to get married. You're about to marry these people and you're going to have a baby with them before you really know them. And can you get out of your marriage? Yes, you can. It'll require another attorney, and it'll require a lot of other contracts and more money. But I don't know if that's a perfect metaphor either, because I would say that marriage is a lot more intimate and vulnerable and like partnershipy than you are with your publisher. One thing I was thinking about was like how much I've leaned on my agent. Like, I heard it described that like your agent gets you the deal and then you're like, bye, I'm with an editor now. And like, no, like the agent, I have had to call my agent whenever the editor won't answer me or I'm wondering something and I can't get clear answers. I call my agent. So make sure you have an agent that will take your calls.
Yeah, the agent is a really, really good middleman. And yes, the agent is, I mean, that is a hard part of the process. We haven't really talked about that. Getting an agent, that's the beginning, right? Well, actually writing your book proposal is really the beginning because you have to have that before you can get an agent. But that agent side of things is vital for your journey in this. And everybody's in the place they're supposed to be. The agent is an agent because they like that sort of communication with the publisher. They know what the publisher wants. They know what you need to do, all of that. And so I don't know many people who have done it without an agent. And usually you can't. Usually book publishers will not even really talk to you without an agent because they know that you really don't know much. And I may be wrong on that. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, but we could have a whole other conversation about getting agents. We're not going to do that today. But I'm going to move on to the next myth unless anyone has any other comments on that. Okay, so this one will be good for you, Molly. We're going to talk about marketing. So the myth, and we already kind of touched on this myth, publishers will market your book. In reality, publishers will not market your book nearly as much as you think. So I have a lot to say about this, but I want to let other people go first. If you want to, anybody want to take it? Or I can go first if you want.
Yeah, I can jump in. I
Okay.
mean, I would say this is perfectly timed right after Mara's question of just kind of that relationship dynamic between author and publisher. What is it? And I think a lot of people expect publisher to mean that they're also going to be your marketing team. And in some ways they might do some things, like they are invested in the book selling, just like you are, probably not as much. And there's lots of reasons for that as well. But I would say, like, your best bet is to plan on doing all of the legwork and marketing yourself and to really leverage like your own audience. And I think sometimes people make the publisher out to be the bad guy, especially in the process of trying to get a book deal, right? Because you hear like the platform conversation come up so much, but in a way they're trying to really do you a favor because they're trying to actually like say like, hey, if we're going to give you this amount of money, like, are you going to be able to sell that many books? And at the end of the day, like, it is a business. And so even though to us as creatives, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing to write a book and we want it to be something that blesses people and something that's just this like wonderful creative legacy thing that we have out in the world. For the publisher, it's really important for it to sell. And at the end of the day, it should be important for us for the book to sell and get in the hands of readers as well. So we have to make a plan. And I think that the publisher starts with that conversation in the book proposal process of looking at the platform and looking at the things and saying like, okay, do we really see that you have a process here and you have a way to actually get your words out into the hands of readers? Are people going to be invested in this? Should we be invested in it? And essentially what you're doing in the book proposal process is trying to convince them like, yes, I have a plan. I'm going to be able to make this happen and I'm going to implement it. I think where authors get a little bit lost in that is when the book actually comes out, they've already done so much work in the writing process. They've gone through the editing process. They've waited and waited for all those emails. And then they're like, wait a minute, now I also have to be the marketing guru. I also have to go on video. Like that's a complaint I hear all the time from clients. It's like, wait, I have to go live. I'm like, yes, absolutely. You have to go live. Like you have to be willing to be the face behind your book for people to care about it. So I think that is something that comes as a shock, but I would encourage people to see it as a gift because you actually get to talk about your work and it can be a really, really fun thing if you let it be.
Yeah, and talking about it also, it will lead you to you sort of understand, like the more you talk about your book, the better you get about talking about it. So I have found this time around, I've done a lot of video and a lot of talking about my book. And as I do that more, I'm like, oh, like I'm so much better at articulating this now. Like the more I do it, like the better I am at it. But I will say, just to give some clarification, like what does the book publisher do? And this is my experience. They have their lists. They have their big, long list that they reach out to. They have their people that they always go to. They have their radio shows, their TV shows, their podcasts and their people. And they go to those, and those are PR people. But we've all gotten PR emails before. We know what those are like. And it's very easy to say no. A lot of them get ignored. If something's always more special if it comes from the actual person. And so, did my publishers do something for me? Yes, they have got me, or the marketing team, they got me placed in Publishers Weekly. I don't think I could have done that on my own. That's something that they did for me both times. I got, the first time around, the publisher actually got me a review, or an excerpt in Good Housekeeping. I could not have done that on my own. That was a big deal. They also got me a review in Christianity Today. So those are three actually really big things that my marketing team did for me. Now, second time around, I didn't get as much, but I also came at it with an understanding that this really was all on me. And so I was reaching out and making a plan in terms of like how, the podcast and all the things, like way before, launch week came out. So the publisher is going to do what they do. They're going to do the status quo. They're going to do it as much as they can. But I can tell you that my marketing team came to me this time around, or the girl I was working with, and she was like, "You're doing such an amazing job. Like, you're getting out there." And I was like, yeah, I mean, like, you have to. And the funny thing was, like, I remember when I first was working with this team and they said, "Are you okay to do podcasts?" And I was like, "Are people allowed to say no to that question?" Like, yes. Like, and then I look at the marketing teams and I think they need better marketing. Like, they need people that understand the social media world better. I feel like there probably just isn't enough budget in some of these publishing companies to hire the people that they need, but ultimately they want authors that can do this for themselves. So I don't know. Anyone else have comments on the marketing side or anything you've experienced there?
I'll just say that also what falls under the marketing team's purview is things like doing all the metadata for Amazon and uploading all of your books information to all of the warehouses and distributors, and like all of that falls under marketing. So your marketing team does a lot more than just like what we think of traditional publicity.
Mm-hmm.
Their job is actually like 10 times that, because what we don't realize, all of the infrastructure setup for selling the book also falls under marketing. So that's something that is usually behind the scenes that we don't really get to see or think about as marketing, but it actually is marketing.
So let's address the small platforms question, because that's coming up in the chat, and it's always the question because most people have small platforms. I mean, that's just the world. We're not all going to be viral social media influencers, but we still want to write books. And you guys have Liz and Ariel have talked about this a ton on their podcast, the platform question, and people that have small platforms can get book deals. Now, from the traditional book publisher side of things, maybe you guys can chime in on sort of some of the things you guys have talked about on the podcast. How does a person with a small publisher, I know this is a bigger conversation, but sort of more succinctly, how do those people end up getting signed?
Ariel? Okay. That's a big question.
Okay. Or maybe a reason they get signed, something.
No, yeah. Well, Ariel said in the chat that a lot of this comes down to genre and topic. If you are trying to write, a self-help or business book or thought leadership or, personal development, anything in that, it's going to be harder. I mean, platform is going to matter more, is my point. In the genres where good writing is more important, like memoir, it will matter less. It's not a ton of memoirists have huge platforms before they get signed. And if you're writing in something more niche, it's also going to matter less. I'm not saying if you're writing self-help and you have a small platform, there's no chance for you. That's never the case. But there are genres and topics that will be harder depending on how popular they are and how crowded they are. And just the average, like advanced size for that kind of book. I am going to do a shameless plug. I am the collaborator on a book coming out with Hay House, February 2024, called Get Signed by Lucinda Halpern. She's a literary agent. She founded Lucinda Literary.
And so I collaborated with her on that book. And she says, and I just want to be really clear that I am completely quoting her. This is her idea, not mine. To get a book deal, you need three things: a big idea, a platform, and good writing. But the best news is you actually only need two of those. So if you have a platform and a big idea, you're in good shape. If you have a big idea and good writing, you're also probably in good shape. If you have a big idea, I can't remember the other combination, but you get the point. My point is, platform is not like, if you've got a big idea and you're a good writer, go for it. You know, it's not always going to be necessary. Should you always be growing your platform? Yes, of course. It's always, you know, listen to the podcast. We say that all the time. Like, yes, you should be always doing that. You should be prepared to market and talk about your book ad nauseum for the rest of your life, quite frankly. But no, it's not like a deal breaker. And the last thing I want to say, and we won't get into this here because again, it's a longer conversation, but platform is not just like social media. Platform is evaluated in all kinds of different ways.
Yes.
And it's evaluated by agents and editors in ways that people don't think a lot about, like speaking, like Erica said, pitching, getting bylines, writing articles, network, you know, like Ariel and I, we do not have big social media numbers, but what we have is a network. We have a lot of big people who are willing to be loudmouths about our book. And there's all kinds of different other ways that platform is evaluated. It's not just social media, and it's not just even the internet. There are all kinds of old-fashioned offline ways that platform can be evaluated. So just broaden the way that you think about that and never count yourself out because of platform, especially if you're a strong writer.
Amen. That's good. Thank you, Liz. And I want to note that people are talking about fiction, and I should have like noted up front that we're primarily talking about nonfiction today. But fiction is really a different beast. It's not the same pattern as like, you don't write a book proposal, you actually have to write the full manuscript for fiction. But you know, of course, there are traditional publishers versus self-publishing for fiction as well. But as Mara said in the chat, platform actually does matter less for fiction, because I don't have a lot of experience in fiction. So if anyone does and wants to chime in, Mara, I don't know if you want to chime in, but isn't it more about the idea and good writing for fiction? Like, platform really.
Yeah, Lucinda would say, and so I will say, it doesn't matter at all, basically.
Okay.
I mean, if you have one, great, but almost no acquiring editor really expects a fiction writer, especially a debut fiction writer, to have like a big platform. Like, if you should be building one, like if you have a novel and you should start an email list, you should start interacting with fans, but like, it's really not a huge factor for fiction at all. It's just like a benefit. It's not really, like, most fiction writers that have big platforms, they got that way after like they had their novels out, you know? Also, I just want to add too, as a word of encouragement for the book, we interviewed like all kinds of editors and agents alike, like top editors and agents. And one of the questions we asked all of them was, like, have you ever signed somebody who either didn't have a platform or had a really small platform? And every single one of them said yes, just because they loved the idea and the writing enough. So like, you know, the top people, you ask any single one of them and they would all say, yeah. And within the last few years, like, it happens, just FYI.
Yeah, there are people that resonate with your idea, and they're gonna want to see that idea through. They can see an audience that's going to love it, whether or not you have that platform. And I will say, you know, I love that, you know, word of encouragement, because you guys here on the panel have probably all heard me tell the story, but I'll share it now, of, you know, way back when, 10 years ago or something, I had run into a book publishing executive or somebody in the industry, and I told her about a book I was working on, or beginning to work on and dreamed of, and it was memoir. And she basically told me, like, there's absolutely no way that you could ever get a memoir published. People don't do that. You're a nobody. And I really could have listened to her and thought there was no chance, but I didn't. And ultimately that was my first book that was published. And so I just urge you not to listen to people that tell you that, because I'm not saying it will happen, but it definitely won't happen if you don't try. So, so I think that's just important and encouraging stuff to keep on with. And so I know we've gone an hour. We're not going to stop quite yet, but if you want to start, if you have questions and you want to start adding them to the chat, we can go through them. I did just want to sort of briefly, we kind of went through this, but answer the question. So like, if you're sitting there going, okay, this is all great information, how do you actually get a book deal? And so I just wanted to go through that process really quickly. And anyone can jump in, but here's like my simple version of that. And so I would say step one is like, you have an idea. You have to have an idea that's somewhat unique, that speaks to a specific audience, that has, as Ariel was saying, has a transformation from point A to point B. What is the reader transformation? You have to write a book proposal. You have to query and find an agent. Then the agent is who submits your proposal to various publishers at different times. There's sort of a seasonal time for when publishers decide on new books. And the agent pretty much is there to sort of sell your work. And then publishers decide, hey, maybe we're interested in you. Sometimes they ask for a phone call. Sometimes they want another chapter to decide. And ultimately they do or don't offer you a deal. And then you go from there. And this process could take anywhere from start to finish. It's, it could be 3 years, like from the time you have an idea to the end, or longer, depending on how long it takes you to do what you got to do, like write your book proposal. So is there anything else that anyone else would want to share about the journey, that people should know, anticipate, things that were unexpected for you in the process? Maybe, I know Meredith, you're like in the middle of this, and you too, Molly, I think you're sort of in the middle of it as well. Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for how much they were going to change my idea. In terms of like changing the title and changing the table of contents. And I think I wish I had known that. I wish I had known to hold it really loosely, because the book we are going to come out with is way better than where I started. And so I wish I had trusted. I wish they hadn't had to pry it out of my hands so much. I think that's really common, but yeah, like knowing when to say, to like keep pushing, like, no, that's not the right title. No, that's not the right cover. Know the points you really want to stand on, the hills you want to die on. And, then trust your gut, but also find the partners that you trust and let the thing unfold. That's something that I wish I had known beforehand. And like, as my agent keeps saying, like, this is just one book, like there's other ones. Like, don't feel like you have to, like, this is my one idea and I have to do this. Like, sometimes you have to write another book first, that's more related to the people you're serving now. And so that you can get space and time to write the other ones. And so like, you have more than one book in you.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, like, you have so much like copy that you're going to need for all the stuff you're doing with marketing. Like, you're going to be taking stories from the book and using them in Instagram posts and in blog posts and in, in articles that you write, in excerpts that you put out. There is so much you can do with stuff that's been left on the cutting floor or whatever, to speak to your audience in the way that you want to speak to them, because you draw people in with your, some people people aren't just going to buy this book. You have to show them what's in it, or show them the ideas within it. And so you can take so much of that and reuse it. And so it's never lost. Like, keep that Google Doc full of the paragraphs that were so hard to cut, and understand that they don't have to die. That makes me as a writer feel so much better. Even if I never use anything in the Google Doc, I know that it's still there. It hasn't been deleted, and I have used some of that for my social media, and I still am. I think, we haven't gotten to this, but it's like like Liz said earlier, like, you're selling your book, like, be prepared to sell your book for a lifetime, right? Like, unless it's like about the 2024 election, your book is probably going to be somewhat evergreen. And so, it's a long haul process. That's something I didn't really understand the first time around. Second time around, I'm like, evergreen perennial seller. Everyone read perennial seller. Everybody, you know, I know Ariel like loves Ryan Holiday. And that book really changed my mindset on, and this could be for self-publishing or traditional publishing. It changed the way that I think about selling a book. And it's actually so freeing because you realize, oh, I don't have to get everything done this launch week. Like it seems so much pressure on launch week, but it's like, no, like if you want this book to be selling, you have got to think long-term. It is a marathon, not a sprint. Okay, Molly, I cut you off or I jumped in. So did you have thoughts on that?
Just on the traditional publishing process, I would say something that surprised me was just that certain parts go really fast for certain people, and then certain parts go really slow for other people. So it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. I think it's so fun, like having friends in the publishing industry and having people who are in the process to kind of relate to one another. But for me, like finding an agent was something that really surprised me because it just happened really quick and it was really organic and it was super kind of easy, to be honest, just because it was a great fit right away. And so that's something that some people spend years doing. And for me, it was just like a really fast, quick thing. So I would just encourage people to not get too intimidated by other people's stories too, and to just embrace whatever kind of your story is in the publishing process.
That is so true. And that is like true of like, sorry for the analogy, but like you hear so many horror stories about like giving birth and like having babies and stuff. And it's like people, if you actually believed all those stories, you would like never even try. So it's the same thing here. Like everybody has a different experience in the book world. And like, exactly, Molly, like some things are easy, some things are not. And so yeah, that's great. Was anyone else just trying to say something?
I was going to say, I think we should address Rebecca's comment in the chat. She says, if it's such a frustrating process, takes so long and doesn't make money, remind me again why I want to get a book deal, but like for reals, which I think is a very good question. I will be totally honest, as an acquisitions editor, I struggled every single year that I continued on in my career. I was having a harder and harder time articulating the value proposition that I offered to authors because royalties are so much better if you self-publish. You get to control the whole creative process. You can do it as fast as you want, and you don't have to deal with all of the bureaucracy, right? So what is the value of traditional publishing? This is something that I have thought long and hard about because I feel like I have to justify my existence, right? As someone who deeply loves traditional publishing, what do I love about it? Well, I'll keep this short. I do believe that traditional publishing actually offers the world like a legitimate good. It actually makes the world a better place. It makes books more accessible. It keeps prices down. It keeps information accessible in ways that it otherwise would not, and makes books accessible in ways that they otherwise would not. There is lots of research to show that literacy rates improve when you have lots of books just in circulation, and this could be self-published. You could have a whole debate about that. But I will say, I do believe that traditional publishing offers the world a legitimate good. Why you should traditionally publish if you want to, you don't have to. There are definitely times when it is better for you to self-publish or to do hybrid publishing. It depends on your goals and your values and what's important to you. Liz and I had this whole conversation just recently because we were in this moment where we had to decide, do we want to take a book deal that we were being offered, or do we want to do self-publishing for all the reasons that I just listed? We decided to go for traditional publishing. One of the things that meant a lot to us was the vetting process. We wanted our book to be held to a really high standard. We wanted to make sure that all of the information that was in our book was going to be going through lots of different eyes, and we wanted to put out the absolute best quality as far as the content goes. And obviously you can do high quality content and high quality production as a self-publishing, endeavor. You can do that. Absolutely. It's all up to you. But we wanted the vetting that came with this process. That was something that was just really important to us. And we felt like, that would be meaningful to us. So for us, I think, and Liz, feel free to jump in here, but I think for us, it was a very deeply heartfelt endeavor. And the reason why we chose that, it wasn't for the money, because our advance was not nearly as good as Erica's or Meredith's, but it was for that reason primarily.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I'll say, from my perspective, the first time around, I just like I didn't even I didn't even think I could get a book deal. And so like just the possibility was so exciting, and that I just kind of ran with it. And it worked out. Second time around though, I didn't know if I'd be able to get a book deal, because to be honest with you all, like my first book wasn't a bestseller, and I didn't know if anybody would want to pick up an author whose first book wasn't a great seller. That's always your risk too. I did sort of pivot, and I had a target market. My second book was very different. And the reason I decided to go for it was because, I mean, even though you do spend your own money, like I knew I was going to save money if I was able to get picked up, because though I did hire a structural editor, like a lot of the edits, like I would have had to pay for on my own. I would have had to pay for a lot more on my own. And so doing it this way, like, did I end up using most of the advance on book stuff? Yes. However, it would have been way more than that. And so for me, I was like, well, if I can get this thing, the cost covered, like that just is so much, like that's a huge relief to me, to my family, to like the pressure situation on money. And so that is why I went for it. But I would say, like, for me, my books are passion projects for sure. And so I'm publishing them no matter what. Like I aim for a traditional publishing. If it doesn't work, I'm going to put self-published. Same with my next one, already sort of spinning in my brain. If I can get time to actually write a proposal, I'm going to get there. And so that's what it is for me. And so there's all these different things to weigh out the values and what you care about and the principle. And do you care about the notoriety? Well, I'll be transparent. I did care about that notoriety. That was important to me. It's been, I think, helpful in my career, getting me other opportunities as well. And so there are so many things to consider, and it's different for each individual person. Okay, so I saw a question over here about how do you know what genres are or are not oversaturated? Anyone want to take that question?
I kind of addressed it in the chat, but I'll just say
Oh, okay.
genres don't really get oversaturated, but topics definitely do. If it's a popular topic, there's going to be a lot of books about it. And then the nice thing is, there's usually actually a lot of room in the market for that. But you may find that you have trouble placing your book with a publisher if that publisher already has a lot of books on that topic. So remember, the publisher is trying to think, how am I going to market all these books to the same people? They don't want books within their list to compete with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't want to take too much time since you answered that in chat. It is up in the chat if anybody wants to do that. Now I see I am missing some of the questions. I apologize. There's a lot of them here, guys, but I did just see one from Janet. Hi, Janet. You are just up the road from me, I know. And you're asking, you're like, you've published one book, self-publishing, and you want to do a second, you want to do traditionaling, but you're saying like 3 years is a long time. You said you're 67. Like, I had a good experience self-publishing. What are your thoughts? And I mean, I think my thought is a traditional book deal is never guaranteed, right? So if I were you and you had a good first experience, I would just continue down that path. You could always pursue traditional book publishing with the option of the self-publishing being sort of your backup option. That's actually honestly sort of my plan every single time, because I never know if it's going to work out, but I'm going to move forward anyway. So you could sort of do plan A, plan B. That would be sort of my suggestion there. Okay, I'm trying to catch up with questions. Did anybody see any that
So there's a question from Meredith.
Yeah, a couple of people were asking about, so Dasha said, I understand about your ideas, content changing, but how do you make sure your core values are still retained with your authentic voice in traditional publishing? Yes. So I told this story on Hungry Authors podcast, so you have to go back and hear the whole thing. But my editor told me that she worked with a really famous author once, and the author decided not to take any edits. And I would highly discourage you from doing that. But, in a marriage, if we're going to go with the marriage analogy, you still show up as you, right? And your name is on the cover of that book. And so you get to decide if that edit is one too far, or if cutting that is a core thing. And you can have a real discussion about the style. They want you to sound like you. They do. That's the the author that they signed. And so I've never felt like they wanted to edit out my tone or my voice or my content or my values. They actually make me sound better They polish it all up to make it sound better. And so if you ever feel like they don't, that is something that you have like a true disagreement where you can't, like, we have to cut this chapter and you just say we have to not. That's when I would get the agent involved to have a conversation more about that. But yeah, I mean, I had one editor once add a bunch more subheads, which, like, because they thought that my paragraphs were too long, and like that's just a style difference. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of getting more used to that now, but in the end we kind of found a happy medium, like, because some people like a subhead every 500 words or something, and it just read too like quippy for me. And so yeah, you're the author, your name's on the book, you get to decide what goes in it and what doesn't. You have the final say. That's how I'm experiencing now. Stay tuned to see if it's true in the end.
So I'm wondering, are there different contracts? Like, is this something that will be clarified in the contract where, certain contracts will allow more creative control, to refuse edits or things like that, versus nope, you sold us the book, and now you really basically just have to do whatever we say.
Yeah.
No, wait, you do not ever have to do what an editor or publisher says. Like, I mean, you can come to such an impasse that they ask for their advance back.
Right. You can get a
So
divorce.
Keep that in mind. But then I tell authors all the time, like, you're allowed to say no. They are like, they are not your boss. Like, you can decline an edit. You can say, I hate that cover and I won't proceed until you put my face on it, or something like that, like that. I don't think that's a great plan, but like, you're allowed to say no. They also can't proceed without your say so. You have more agency. Like, authors have more agency than I think they realize. So like, the publisher and editor are not just like bossing you around. If you don't like it, you say no. And if you want to draw a line in the sand, you do it. And then you evaluate how far you want to take that. But like, no, you have agency. You can say no. You can decline. Like Meredith said, you can decline every edit. I think it's a bad idea, but could you? Yeah, you probably could.
And
Ariel?
Casey says, I would think traditional publishers want the author to be happy, and they do. Like, they genuinely do. I think it's very easy for us to, even now, having been on that side of the table, it's very easy to be like an us-them situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they really do care about the books. Like Liz said earlier, or maybe Meredith, every single editor gets into this because they're book people and they love books. They love books and they love working with authors and they want to publish successful books. And so every single thing that they recommend to you is going to be coming from a place of, we want to make this book more successful. So if you can receive it with that openness, then I think it helps go a long way, that publishers are genuine. And for 98% of the time, publishers and editors are coming at you with these recommendations and these edits and these suggestions that you're like, that is so wrong, but they're coming at it with their market knowledge and their understanding, and they genuinely want your book to succeed.
Which is part of why I like going back to Ariel's answer of, why traditional publishing, if it's this much of a headache and there's so much to complain about, there is a buy-in that traditional publishing had, like a literal buy-in, and just reputation and jobs on the line. That is not the case with self-publishing to some degree. Like, we'll say till I'm blue in the face that there are amazing hybrid self-publishers and you can get like an amazing book that way. But there is still a buy-in that traditional publishers have that isn't the same when it comes to traditional self and hybrid publishing. So like, that there's just like, it's if an editor has like a bunch of flops, they get fired, like they have a lot on the line. And, that might not be the most like literary reason to make your book a success, but like everybody has something to lose. And so everybody cares, in addition to just caring because they like books and they probably like you.
And I would just add, sort of similar to what Molly was saying earlier, like I didn't have an experience where people were trying to change all these things that I was like, oh no, I don't want to. Like, I had a good experience in terms of the editing and like just feeling like there are little places that it made it better. I never had any sort of thing where I was like, no, we can't do that. Like, and so you may have that experience too. It may, your problem may be something completely different. And so don't prejudge the experience necessarily, again, on someone else's. I did want to touch really quickly. We will end by 9:30, but I did want to touch really quickly on the hybrid conversation. And then hybrid versus because I know many of us, if not, I don't know if everyone has been in Hope Writers, but often in Hope Writers, I've seen people like, oh, I got an email from this book publisher and they want to publish my book. And I'm, everyone's sort of immediately like, I don't know, if somebody emailed you, a person with very little name ID and wants to publish your book, I don't know, let's maybe step back a second and question what's the rub here? And so, what are those publishers? I think there's hybrid, and then there's basically just a publisher that's pay me $10,000 to publish your book. So I don't have a lot of knowledge on that. Does anyone have anything on that?
Assisted self-publishers,
Maybe.
yeah.
Is that what it is?
Slash, as Stephanie said, sometimes called vanity publishers.
Okay.
So so the difference is in the investment. So as a traditional publisher, they are making the primary investment in your book. They also get primary reward, right? They keep most of the money that they get back. Hybrid publishers intended to be 50-50. They make half the investment, but you also pay into that investment to create the actual book. And then you split the money 50-50 usually. Assisted self-publishing is you make the investment. So usually self-publishing authors would have to hire an editor, hire a cover designer, hire an interior designer, hire the typesetters, hire the printer. When you hire as a self-publishing company, you can hire one company to do all of those things so that you're not hiring it out to every single different person. That's assisted self-publishing companies. There's lots of them out there. And so that's kind of the difference.
Okay. All right. Yes. And Meredith is saying there was an episode of Hungry Authors about this today. Clearly did not check my feed. But yes, obviously you should all subscribe to the Hungry Authors podcast and to the Artist's Way podcast. And I'm saying the right title, right, Meredith?
Artists for Joy.
Artists for Joy. Sorry. The Artist's Way is the book that a lot of Meredith's work is based on, which you should buy.
Exactly. Yes.
So, and did anyone else see any other questions that we should address from the chat as you're looking at it? Okay. Well, at this, we've been going on, so I will shut us down. We are going to send out an email to everyone that signed up with all of our contact information, with the recording. We want to stay connected with you guys. We would love to answer further questions, offer our resources, offer our expertise. So I'll be sending out all that information, all of our social media stuff. And thank you so much for being here. It was so great to talk about this. I know there were about a million little side conversations that we could go off onto. I feel like there were probably 10 different 1-hour conversations that we could have. So maybe we'll do this again. So thank you for being here. Thanks everyone. And we will see you on the social medias.
Bye everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.